The dense forest on the alien moon of Krylos 7 stretched endlessly, its towering trees casting long shadows over the ground. The air was thick with humidity, and strange sounds echoed through the stillness. Chirps, clicks, and the occasional rustle of leaves as unseen creatures moved about. It was a place that felt alive, almost watching, as if the very planet itself was aware of the intruders stepping into its domain. Emma Carter tightened her grip on her rifle as she scanned the area ahead. Her boots crunched softly against the damp soil, each step deliberate and cautious. She was leading a small team of 5 soldiers, all dressed in standard-issue combat gear, their faces painted with camouflage to blend into the alien environment. They had been sent to investigate unusual energy readings detected by satellites orbiting Krylos 7. No one knew what they would find, but Emma wasn't naive enough to think it would be anything good. Strange energy signals usually meant trouble, especially out here in uncharted territory. Behind her, Liam Parker adjusted his helmet, his breathing steady despite the oppressive heat. To his left, Rachel Brooks checked her weapon for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, her fingers moving automatically over the familiar shape of the rifle. Across from them, Kyle Jensen muttered something under his breath, though no one could hear him clearly. The last 2 members of the group, Maria Torres and Daniel Hayes, stayed close together, their eyes darting nervously at every sound. "Stay sharp," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying just enough to reach everyone. "We don't know what's out there." Liam nodded, his jaw tight. "You really think it's hostiles?" "I don't know," Emma replied, her tone flat, "but we're not taking chances." They continued moving forward, following the faint trail marked by glowing waypoints projected from their wrist consoles. The energy readings were growing stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat in the distance. Whatever was causing them was close, now maybe less than a kilometer away. The tension in the air was palpable, pressing down on all of them like an invisible weight. As they pushed deeper into the jungle, the vegetation grew denser, forcing them to slow their pace. Vines hung low, tangling around their legs while thorny bushes scratched at their armor. The light filtering through the canopy above dimmed further, making it harder to see more than a few meters ahead. Emma signaled for the team to stop, holding up a fist to indicate silence. She crouched low, her rifle raised, and scanned the area carefully. Something wasn't right. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, a primal instinct warning her of danger. She glanced at her teammates, who were equally alert, their weapons trained on different angles of the clearing. The forest had gone eerily quiet, the usual background noise replaced by an unnatural stillness. Even the insects seemed to have vanished. Then, without warning, the attack came. Bright beams of light streaked through the air, cutting through the foliage like knives. One of the beams struck Maria first, slicing through her chest with horrifying precision. She didn't even have time to scream before collapsing to the ground, lifeless. Before anyone could react, another beam hit Daniel, severing his arm cleanly at the shoulder. He fell backward, clutching the bloody stump as he let out a guttural cry of pain. "Take cover," Emma shouted, diving behind a fallen tree trunk just as another blast tore past her head. The rest of the team scrambled for shelter, firing blindly, into the dense brush where the shots had come from. The attackers revealed themselves moments later, emerging from the shadows with terrifying speed. They were unlike anything Emma had ever seen. Tall and lanky, their bodies seemed almost skeletal, covered in smooth, translucent skin that shimmered with faint hues of blue and green. Their limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and their elongated heads housed large, multifaceted eyes that glowed ominously. Each creature carried a sleek metallic weapon capable of emitting those deadly beams of energy. "Aliens!" Kyle yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "What do we do?" "Keep shooting," Emma barked, squeezing off rounds from her rifle. Her bullet struck one of the creatures squarely in the chest, but instead of falling, it merely staggered backward. Its wound began to seal itself almost instantly, the flesh knitting back together as if it had never been injured. Emma cursed under her breath. These things weren't just dangerous, they were practically indestructible. Rachel fired a grenade launcher, sending an explosive round hurtling toward a cluster of aliens. The resulting explosion engulfed several of them, tearing apart their bodies in a spray of gore. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might actually stand a chance, but the victory was short-lived. More aliens poured into the clearing, their numbers overwhelming. Kyle went down next, his leg severed by a precise shot from one of their weapons. He screamed in agony, clutching at the stump as blood pooled beneath him. Liam tried to drag him to safety, but an alien pounced on him, sinking its claws deep into his back. His cries were cut short as the creature snapped his neck with a sickening crack. Emma gritted her teeth, rage boiling inside her as she watched her team being slaughtered. She emptied her magazine into the nearest alien, reloading in record time. Her movements were mechanical, driven by training and adrenaline. She couldn't afford to hesitate, not now. Maria was already dead, Daniel bleeding out, and Kyle barely clinging to life. Only Rachel remained beside her, her face pale but determined. Together they formed a defensive line, firing relentlessly at the advancing horde. The aliens kept coming, undeterred by the casualties they suffered. Their sheer numbers made it impossible to hold them off forever. "We can't keep this up," Rachel shouted, desperation edging her voice. "There's too many." Emma didn't respond. Her mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. Then she remembered the thermal charge strapped to her belt, a high-explosive device designed to create a wide-radius blast. It was risky, almost suicidal, but it might buy them enough time to escape or at least take some of these monsters with her when she died. "Cover me," she ordered, pulling the charge free and arming it with a flick of her thumb. Rachel nodded, unleashing a hail of gunfire to keep the aliens at bay. Emma sprinted toward the center of the clearing, dodging beams of light that zipped past her ears. When she reached the midpoint, she dropped to one knee and planted the charge firmly on the ground. "Fall back," she yelled, turning to run. Rachel hesitated for a split second before obeying, sprinting after her as fast as her legs could carry her. Behind them, the aliens surged forward, sensing victory within reach. Emma counted down silently in her head, her lungs burning as she pushed herself to move faster. 5, 4, 3, 2. The explosion was deafening, a brilliant flash of white-hot fire engulfing the clearing. The shockwave knocked Emma off her feet, slamming her hard against the ground. Pain exploded across her body, but she forced herself to stay conscious, rolling onto her side just in time to avoid being crushed by a falling tree branch. When the smoke cleared, the clearing was a charred wasteland. Alien corpses lay scattered everywhere, their grotesque forms twisted and broken. Emma coughed violently, smoke stinging her eyes as she struggled to sit up. Her ears rang from the blast and her right arm throbbed painfully where debris had struck it. She looked around, searching for Rachel or any sign of her other teammates, but there was nothing. Just silence. Zorvak, the leader of the alien pack, emerged from the tree line moments later, his glowing eyes scanning the devastation. Seeing no survivors, he let out a triumphant roar, raising his weapon skyward in celebration. The ambush had been successful. The humans were dead. Or so he thought. Unbeknownst to him, Emma Carter still lived. Hidden beneath the wreckage, battered, but breathing. She vowed to make him pay for what he had done. Emma lay still among the ruins of the clearing, her body aching with every shallow breath she took. The explosion had thrown her far enough to avoid the worst of the flames, but it hadn't spared her completely. Her right arm was limp, clearly, broken, and burns covered her face and neck, the skin raw and tender. Her combat suit was torn in several places, exposing cuts and bruises that throbbed with pain. But despite all of this, she was alive, and furious. She forced herself to sit up, gritting her teeth against the agony coursing through her body. The ringing in her ears had dulled to a faint hum, allowing her to hear the distant sounds of the jungle once more. Birds, or whatever passed for birds on Krilo 7, were beginning to call again, their cries tentative as if testing whether it was safe to return. Emma ignored them, focusing instead on the task at hand. Survival. Her first priority was assessing her injuries. She pressed a hand against her ribs, wincing as she felt a sharp stab of pain. Broken? Maybe. Cracked? Definitely. Either way, she couldn't afford to waste time worrying about it. Using her good arm, she rummaged through the remnants of her gear, salvaging what little remained intact. A half-empty canteen, a few protein bars, some bandages, and a damaged communicator were all she could find. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The communicator was beyond repair, its screen cracked and dark. Emma cursed under her breath, tossing it aside. Without it, she had no way of contacting the outpost or calling for reinforcements. She was on her own now, stranded in hostile territory with nothing but her wits and determination to keep her alive. Still, she refused to give up. Every fiber of her being screamed that she couldn't die here. Not like this. Not after what those creatures had done to her team. Maria, Daniel, Kyle, Liam, Rachel. Their faces flashed through her mind, each one a reminder of the lives stolen from her. The aliens thought they had won, that they had erased her along with the rest of her squad. They were wrong. Emma patched herself up as best she could, wrapping her arm in a makeshift splint using strips of fabric torn from her uniform. The burns on her face stung as she applied antiseptic gel scavenged from her medkit, but she bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. Pain was temporary. Failure was permanent. That was a lesson drilled into her during training, and it was one she clung to now more than ever. With her immediate needs taken care of, Emma turned her attention to her surroundings. The explosion had left the clearing barren, the trees reduced to blackened stumps and the ground scorched. There was no sign of the aliens, though she knew they wouldn't be far. Creatures like them didn't just walk away from a fight. They regrouped, planned, and struck again when least expected. She needed to move, and quickly. But where? The answer came to her as she sifted through the debris. Among the wreckage, she found fragments of alien weapons, shards of metal and pieces of technology unlike anything humanity had ever created. Holding one of the shards in her hand, she examined it closely. Its surface shimmered faintly, almost alive, and it pulsed with a faint warmth. It was alien, yes, but also fascinating and dangerous. The energy readings that had brought her team to Krylos 7 in the first place must have originated from these creatures. Their weapons, their armor, their very biology. It was all tied to the strange power source she'd been sent to investigate. If she wanted answers and revenge, she would need to follow the trail back to its source. Emma stood slowly, leaning on a sturdy branch she'd picked up as a makeshift crutch. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she forced herself to take one step, then another. Movement was painful, but staying still meant death. She glanced back at the clearing one last time, committing it to memory. This was where her team had fallen, where their lives had been cut short. Someday, she promised herself, she would come back here, but not today. Today, she had work to do. The jungle was different now. The explosion had shaken something loose in the ecosystem, and the air felt heavier, charged with an unnatural energy. Strange plants glowed faintly in the dim light, their leaves pulsating rhythmically as if breathing. The ground was slick with moisture, making every step treacherous. Emma moved cautiously, her senses on high alert. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she pushed it aside. Food could wait. Survival couldn't. She rationed her water carefully, taking small sips whenever her throat became too dry to bear. The protein bars tasted like ash, but they provided enough fuel to keep her going. Sleep was out of the question. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of her fallen comrades staring back at her. So she kept moving, mile after mile, until her body screamed for rest. On the third day, she encountered her first real challenge since the ambush. A predator native to Krylos 7, a massive, insect-like creature with 6 spindly legs and mandibles dripping with venom, emerged from the underbrush blocking her path. Its carapace gleamed menacingly in the filtered sunlight, and its multifaceted eyes locked onto her with predatory intent. Emma froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Running wasn't an option. The creature was faster than she was, even without her injuries. Fighting it head-on was suicide. She had no weapon capable of piercing its thick exoskeleton. Her only chance was to outsmart it. Slowly, she lowered herself into a crouch, keeping her movements deliberate and controlled. The creature hissed, its mandibles snapping eagerly as it prepared to strike. Emma grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it at the beast's face, temporarily blinding it. While it thrashed wildly, trying to clear its eyes, she darted past it, weaving between trees and ducking under low-hanging vines. The creature roared in frustration, giving chase, but Emma's smaller frame allowed her to navigate the dense foliage more easily. After several tense minutes, she managed to lose it, collapsing against a tree trunk as exhaustion overtook her. It was moments like these that tested her resolve. Each victory, no matter how small, reminded her why she was still alive. She wasn't just surviving for herself. She was surviving for her team, for justice, for vengeance. By the 5th day, Emma's condition had worsened. Her injuries were healing poorly, the burns on her face oozing pus and attracting flies. Her broken arm throbbed constantly, making it difficult to hold the branch she used as a crutch. Her clothes were torn and filthy, and her boots were falling apart. But none of that mattered. What did matter was the growing sense of purpose driving her forward. She had pieced together clues from the alien weapons she'd salvaged, following their unique energy signatures deeper into the jungle. The trail led her to a massive structure, hidden within a valley shrouded by thick mist. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen, a fortress carved directly into the side of a mountain, its walls smooth and metallic, reflecting the dim light in eerie patterns. Guard towers loomed overhead, manned by creatures identical to the ones who had ambushed her team. This was it, the source of the energy readings, the heart of the enemy's operations. Emma observed the fortress from a distance, careful not to reveal her position. She counted at least 24 guards patrolling the perimeter, their weapons glowing faintly in the gloom. Inside, she spotted flashes of movement, other aliens, larger machines, and something else, something human. Prisoners. Her blood ran cold as realization dawned. These creatures weren't just attacking humans, they were capturing them, experimenting on them, using them for whatever twisted purposes fueled their existence. Emma clenched her fists, her resolve hardening like steel. She wouldn't let them get away with it. Over the next few hours, she formulated a plan. Attacking head-on was impossible. She needed stealth, precision, and timing. She scouted the area, identifying weak points in the fortress's defenses. A drainage pipe near the base of the mountain caught her eye. It was narrow, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, but it might lead inside undetected. As night fell, Emma made her move. Keeping to the shadows, she crept closer to the fortress, her every step calculated and silent. When she reached the drainage pipe, she hesitated for a moment, listening for any signs of movement. Hearing none, she crawled inside, her body scraping painfully against the rough metal interior. The tunnel was long and claustrophobic, reeking of mold and decay. Emma fought back waves of nausea as she inched forward, her broken arm dragging uselessly behind her. At one point, she thought she heard voices echoing ahead, but she couldn't be sure. Finally, after what felt like hours, she emerged into a dimly lit corridor. She was inside. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The aliens thought they had killed her. They thought they had won. But they were about to learn the truth. Emma Carter always came back, and when she did, she brought hell with her. Emma moved cautiously through the dimly lit corridor, her senses sharp and alert. The air inside the fortress was cold and metallic, carrying a faint hum that vibrated through the walls. She pressed herself against the smooth surface of the wall, her breathing slow and controlled. Every step she took echoed softly, and she winced at the sound, knowing how easily it could give her away. The corridor stretched ahead, branching off into multiple directions. Alien symbols glowed faintly on the walls, pulsing with the same eerie energy she had seen in their weapons. Emma didn't understand the markings, but she didn't need to. What mattered was finding the prisoners and destroying whatever operation the aliens were running here. She tightened her grip on the shard of alien metal she had salvaged from the clearing. its warm surface humming faintly in her hand. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. As she crept forward, she heard voices. Alien voices. They were guttural and harsh, speaking in a language she couldn't comprehend. Peering around a corner, she saw two guards standing outside a heavy door, their weapons slung lazily over their shoulders. They didn't seem particularly alert, likely assuming no human could possibly infiltrate their stronghold. Emma smiled grimly. They were wrong. She waited for the right moment, watching their movements carefully. When one of the guards turned, slightly to adjust his weapon, Emma struck. Moving silently, she closed the distance between them in seconds. Before the first guard could react, she drove the shard of metal deep into his throat. He gurgled, his glowing eyes widening in shock as he collapsed to the ground. The second guard spun around, raising his weapon, but Emma was faster. She grabbed the fallen guard's weapon and fired a burst of energy, striking him squarely in the chest. He staggered backward, clutching the wound before falling lifeless to the floor. Emma stood still for a moment, listening for any sign of alarm. The corridor remained silent. Satisfied, she dragged the bodies into a nearby alcove, hiding them from view. She couldn't afford to leave evidence of her presence. Not yet. The heavy door led to another corridor, this one wider and more brightly lit. Emma moved quickly, keeping close to the walls as she scanned her surroundings. Along the way, she passed several rooms, their interiors visible through transparent panels. Inside, she saw humans, dozens of them, hooked up to strange machines. Wires and tubes snaked across their bodies, connecting them to devices that pulsed with the same alien energy radiating from the walls. Their faces were pale and lifeless, their eyes closed as if in a deep sleep. Some twitched involuntarily, their bodies reacting to whatever was being done to them. Emma felt a surge of anger so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. These were her people, captured, experimented on, drained of their life force to power the aliens' machines. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay focused. She couldn't save them all right now, not alone, but she could cripple the operation enough to buy them time. She continued deeper into the fortress, following the hum of energy growing louder with each step. Eventually, she reached a massive chamber, its ceiling stretching high above her head. In the center of the room stood a towering machine, its surface covered in glowing conduits and spinning gears. Alien technicians scurried around it, adjusting dials and monitoring readouts. The air was thick with heat and the smell of ozone filled her nostrils. This was it, the heart of the operation. Emma observed the scene from the shadows, planning her next move. The machine was heavily guarded, with at least 10 aliens stationed around it. Taking them all out silently would be impossible, but she didn't need to kill them all. She just needed to sabotage the machine itself. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for weak points. A control panel near the base of the machine caught her attention. If she could reach it, she might be able to overload the system and cause a chain reaction. Moving carefully, she slipped into the chamber, staying low to avoid detection. One of the technicians glanced in her direction, but she froze, blending into the shadows until he looked away. She reached the control panel without incident and crouched behind it, pulling out a small explosive charge she had scavenged earlier. It wasn't powerful enough to destroy the entire machine, but it would do enough damage to cripple it. As she worked, she heard footsteps approaching. An alien guard rounded the corner, his weapon drawn. Emma cursed under her breath, realizing she had been spotted. Without hesitation, she lunged at him, driving the shard of alien metal into his side. He let out a guttural scream, alerting the others. Within seconds, alarms blared throughout the fortress, red lights flashing overhead. Emma didn't waste time. She activated the explosive charge and set it against the control panel, then sprinted toward the nearest exit. Behind her, the machine began to spark and sputter, its systems failing as the charge detonated. Flames erupted from the conduits, spreading rapidly along the structure. Aliens shouted in panic, scrambling to contain the fire. But it was too late. The machine was collapsing, taking the chamber with it. Emma ran as fast as her injured body. would allow, dodging falling debris and bursts of energy as the fortress began to shake violently. The corridors she had navigated earlier were now chaotic, filled with smoke and panicked aliens. She fought her way through them, using stolen weapons and sheer determination to keep moving forward. Eventually, she reached the drainage pipe she had used to enter the fortress. Without hesitation, she crawled inside, ignoring the pain as her broken arm scraped against the rough metal. The tunnel seemed longer now, the distant roar of destruction echoing behind her. She pushed herself harder, driven by the knowledge that she had succeeded. The machine was gone and the alien's operation was crippled. When she emerged back into the jungle, the night air hit her like a wave. She collapsed onto the damp ground, gasping for breath as exhaustion overtook her. Her body ached, her injuries screaming for relief, but she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. She had done what she set out to do. She had struck back, but she wasn't finished yet. As dawn broke over Krylo 7, Emma sat hidden among the trees, watching the fortress burn in the distance. Smoke billowed into the sky, a dark plume visible for miles. She knew the aliens wouldn't give up easily. They would regroup, rebuild, and come after her with even greater fury. But she also knew something else. She had proven they weren't invincible. She had shown them that humanity could fight back, even when the odds seemed impossible. Emma stood slowly, leaning on her makeshift crutch. Her journey wasn't over. There were still prisoners to rescue, still answers to uncover, and still justice to deliver. She glanced back at the fortress one last time, her expression resolute. "They thought they had killed me," she muttered, her voice steady despite her weariness. "But I came back for them." With that, she turned and disappeared into the jungle, ready to face whatever came next. The jungle was alive with sound as Emma Carter moved through the dense undergrowth, her body battered but determined. The fortress she had sabotaged still burned in the distance, its smoke painting the sky a dark gray. She knew the aliens would not let this act go unpunished. They would hunt her down and they would come prepared. But Emma didn't care. Every step she took was fueled by a single purpose: to finish what she had started. Her injuries slowed her progress, each movement sending sharp jolts of pain through her broken arm and burned skin. Yet she refused to stop. She had made it this far against impossible odds, and she wasn't about to give up now. Her mind replayed the images of the prisoners she had seen inside the fortress, humans hooked up to machines, their life force drained to power alien technology. It filled her with a rage so deep that it pushed aside her exhaustion and pain. She couldn't save them all during her first infiltration, but she could make sure they wouldn't suffer any longer. Emma reached the edge of a wide clearing, her eyes scanning the area carefully. The ground here was muddy, dotted with pools of stagnant water reflecting the pale light of Krylo 7's twin suns. In the center of the clearing stood a group of aliens, their glowing forms unmistakable even from a distance. They were gathered around something, or someone. As she crept closer, keeping low behind thick bushes, she realized it was a human prisoner. The man was chained to a metal post, his head bowed and his clothes torn. His face was pale, his lips cracked from dehydration. Two aliens stood over him, one holding a device that emitted a pulsing blue light. The other held a weapon, its barrel pointed directly at the man's chest. Emma's jaw tightened as she watched. Whatever they were doing to him, it wasn't good. She shifted slightly, adjusting her grip on the stolen alien rifle slung across her shoulder. The weapon was unfamiliar, its controls strange and awkward compared to the firearms she was used to. But she had learned enough during her time in the fortress to use it effectively. If she timed her attack right, she might be able to free the prisoner before the aliens realized what was happening. Taking a deep breath, Emma steadied herself. Then, without hesitation, she stepped out into the open and fired. The first shot struck one of the aliens square in the chest, sending it sprawling backward. The second alien turned toward her, its multifaceted eyes narrowing as it raised its weapon. Emma ducked behind a tree just as a beam of energy sliced through the air, where she had been standing. She returned fire, hitting the creature in the leg. It stumbled but didn't fall, its regenerative abilities already healing the wound. Cursing under her breath, Emma fired again, aiming for its head this time. The shot connected, and the alien collapsed, lifeless. The prisoner looked up, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. Who are you?" he stammered, his voice hoarse. "No time for questions," Emma replied sharply, moving quickly to unlock his chains with a tool scavenged from the fortress. "Can you walk?" "I think so," the man said, struggling to his feet. He wobbled, unsteadily, but managed to stay upright. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Emma muttered, glancing around nervously. The sound of the gunfire would have alerted nearby patrols. They needed to move, and fast. She led the man through the jungle, weaving between trees and avoiding open spaces. Behind them, the distant shouts of aliens echoed through the forest, growing louder with each passing minute. Emma pushed herself harder, urging the man to keep pace despite his obvious weakness. She couldn't afford to slow down, not when every second counted. After nearly an hour of running, they reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow ravine. Below, a river flowed swiftly, its waters churning as they cut through the jagged landscape. Emma paused, studying the terrain. Crossing the ravine would be risky. The rocks were slippery and the current below was strong. But it was their best chance to lose their pursuers. "We need to cross here," she told the man, pointing to a series of stepping stones leading partway across the ravine. "Stay close and don't look down." The man nodded, though his expression betrayed his fear. Together they began making their way across the stones, moving carefully to avoid slipping. Halfway across, the man lost his footing, letting out a startled cry as he teetered on the edge. Emma grabbed his arm, pulling him back onto solid ground. "Focus," she snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. Finally, they reached the other side, collapsing onto the damp earth as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Emma peered back across the ravine, watching as a group of aliens appeared on the opposite bank. They shouted angrily, gesturing toward the river but unwilling or unable to follow. For now, they were safe. As night fell, Emma and the man huddled together beneath the shelter of a fallen tree, shielding themselves from the rain that had begun to pour. The man introduced himself as Nathan, a scientist who had been captured while investigating the energy readings on Krylos 7. He explained that the aliens were using humans as living batteries, extracting their bioenergy to fuel their advanced technology. The process was excruciatingly painful and often fatal, leaving victims hollow shells of their former selves. "They're monsters," Nathan whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "They don't see us as people, just resources." Emma didn't respond. She already knew what the aliens were capable of. What mattered now was stopping them. Nathan proved to be more than just a burden. He had knowledge of the aliens' operations, including the location of another facility deeper in the jungle. According to him, it served as a central hub for their experiments, housing both equipment and additional prisoners. If they could destroy it, they might cripple the aliens' efforts permanently. Emma agreed, though she knew the mission would be dangerous. With Nathan's guidance, they plotted a course through the jungle, avoiding known patrol routes and setting traps along the way to slow down their pursuers. Despite her injuries, Emma pressed on, driven by a mix of anger and determination. On the third day of travel, they reached the outskirts of the new facility. Unlike the fortress, this structure was smaller and less fortified, built into the side of a hill rather than carved into a mountain. Guards patrolled the perimeter, but their numbers were fewer, likely because they believed the location was secure. Emma studied the layout carefully, memorizing entrances and weak points. "This is it," she said quietly, turning to Nathan. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." "I understand," Nathan replied, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Let's do this." Emma nodded, gripping her weapon tightly. She signaled for Nathan to stay behind as she moved forward, slipping silently into the shadows. The first guard went down quickly, a precise shot from her rifle silencing him before he could raise the alarm. The second guard followed moments later, collapsing to the ground as Emma struck him from behind with the butt of her weapon. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet, the hum of machinery filling the air. Emma navigated the corridors cautiously, her footsteps muffled by the soft padding of her boots. She found the prisoners almost immediately, locked in cells lining the walls of a large chamber. Their faces lit up with hope as she approached, whispering her name like a prayer. "It's okay," she assured them, unlocking the doors with a keycard taken from a dead guard. "You're free." But freedom came at a cost. As the last cell opened, alarms blared throughout the facility, red lights flashing overhead. The aliens had discovered the breach. Emma turned to face the entrance, raising her weapon as a horde of creatures poured into the room. There were too many to fight, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she planted explosives at key structural points, triggering a countdown that would bring the entire facility crashing down. "Go!" she shouted to the prisoners, ushering them toward the exit. Nathan hesitated, looking back at her. "What about you?" he asked. "I'll hold them off," she replied, her voice firm. "Now go." Reluctantly, Nathan obeyed, disappearing into the crowd of fleeing humans. Emma stood alone, surrounded by enemies, her weapon blazing as she unleashed everything she had left. One by one, the aliens fell, but more kept coming. When the explosives detonated, the walls began to collapse, burying the facility, and anyone still inside beneath tons of rubble. Emma ran for the exit, her lungs burning as she pushed herself to the limit. She emerged into the cool night air, just as the ground shook violently behind her. The facility imploded, sending a cloud of dust and debris billowing into the sky. Exhausted but victorious, Emma sank to her knees, her chest heaving with effort. It was over, or so she thought. In the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows, a towering alien with glowing eyes and claws dripping with venom. Zorvak, the leader of the pack, stared at her with hatred in his gaze. "You should be dead," he growled, his voice low and guttural. Emma rose to her feet, her weapon raised. "Guess you're not as smart as you look," she replied, her voice cold and steady. And then, the final battle began. Zorvak lunged at Emma with terrifying speed, his claws slicing through the air where she had been standing just moments before. She rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow, and fired her weapon at the alien leader. The energy beam struck him in the shoulder, but instead of falling, he merely staggered backward. His wounds began to heal almost instantly, the same regenerative abilities that had made his kind so difficult to kill now working against her once again. Emma gritted, her teeth, her mind racing as she tried to find a weakness. Zorvak was larger and stronger than any of the other aliens she had faced, his movements precise and calculated. He wasn't just fighting blindly. He was hunting her, testing her defenses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But Emma refused to back down. Every step she took, every shot she fired, was driven by the memories of her fallen comrades. They had died because of him, and she wasn't about to let him walk away. The battle raged on, the two combatants exchanging blows in a deadly dance. Zorvak swung his claws again, forcing Emma to duck and counter with a burst of energy from her rifle. This time the shot connected with his chest, sending him stumbling backward. For a brief moment she thought she might have gained the upper hand, but Zorvak recovered quickly, letting out a guttural roar as he charged at her once more. Emma dove to the side, rolling onto her feet as Zorvak's claws tore into the ground where she had been. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the earth, knocking her off balance. She hit the ground hard, her broken arm screaming in protest as she landed awkwardly. Pain seared through her body, but she forced herself to keep moving. Staying still meant death. As Zorvak closed in, Emma spotted something glinting in the dirt nearby, a shard of metal from the destroyed facility. It was jagged and sharp, its edges glowing faintly with residual energy. Without hesitation, she grabbed it, clutching it tightly in her good hand. If bullets wouldn't stop him, maybe this would. Zorvak lunged again, his claws aimed directly at her throat. Emma twisted to the side, avoiding the worst of the attack, and drove the shard deep into his side. He let out a deafening scream, his glowing eyes widening in pain as he stumbled backward. The wound didn't heal this time. The shard must have disrupted his regenerative abilities. Emma didn't waste the opportunity. She pulled the shard free and struck again, this time aiming for his chest. Zorvak roared in fury, swiping at her with one massive claw. The blow caught her across the ribs, sending her sprawling to the ground. Blood trickled from the fresh gash on her side, but she ignored the pain, focusing all her energy on staying alive. Zorvak loomed over her, his breathing heavy, his movements slower now. The shard had weakened him, but he wasn't finished yet. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Emma pushed herself to her feet. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she stood tall, meeting Zorvak's gaze with unwavering determination. "This ends now," she said, her voice low and steady despite the exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. With a final desperate cry, Zorvak launched himself at her one last time. Emma sidestepped at the last second, dodging his attack and driving the shard straight into his chest. He froze, his glowing eyes dimming as the life drained from his body. For a moment he simply stood there, swaying unsteadily, before collapsing to the ground with a thunderous crash. Emma sank to her knees, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. The fight was over. Zorvak was dead. Around her, the remains of the facility smoldered, its destruction a testament to her resolve. She had done what she set out to do. She had avenged her team and struck a crippling blow to the aliens' operations on Krylos 7. Hours later, Emma limped back to the rendezvous point where Nathan and the freed prisoners were waiting. Their faces lit up with relief and gratitude as they saw her approach, though her battered appearance told them everything they needed to know about the cost of their freedom. Nathan rushed to her side, helping her sit down as the others gathered around. "You did it," Nathan said, his voice filled with awe. "You stopped them." Emma shook her head, wincing as the movement sent fresh waves of pain through her body. "Not completely," she replied, her voice hoarse. "But we hit them hard. That's something." The survivors began tending to her injuries, wrapping her wounds and offering her water and food scavenged from the ruins of the facility. As she rested, Emma allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought about Maria, Daniel, Kyle, Liam, Rachel, all the members of her team who hadn't made it. Their faces lingered in her mind, a reminder of why she had fought so hard. She had failed to save them, but she had honored their memory by ensuring no one else would suffer the same fate. By the time reinforcements arrived the next day, Emma was barely conscious. Soldiers from the human outpost on Krylos 7 surrounded her, their expressions a mix of disbelief and admiration. They carried her onto a transport shuttle, where medics worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition. Through the haze of painkillers and exhaustion, Emma heard snippets of their conversations, talk of her bravery, her sacrifice, her impossible victory against overwhelming odds. When she finally regained full consciousness days later, she found herself lying in a medical bay aboard the outpost. Nathan was there, sitting beside her bed, his face lighting up when he saw her open her eyes. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Like I got hit by a truck," Emma replied, her voice weak but steady. "What happened?" "The aliens are retreating," Nathan explained. "Without Zorvak leading them, their forces fell apart. We've secured most of the area and the remaining humans are safe. You did it, Emma. You saved us all." Emma nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She knew the war wasn't over. The aliens would regroup eventually, but for now, humanity had won a crucial victory, and she had played a part in making that happen. In the weeks that followed, Emma became a legend among the troops stationed on Krylos 7. Stories of her courage spread quickly, inspiring hope and determination in the face of adversity. She was hailed as a hero, offered medals and commendations, but she turned them all down. Heroes weren't supposed to survive ambushes or take down entire alien strongholds alone. She had simply done what needed to be done. When asked how she managed to pull off such an impossible feat, Emma gave the same answer every time. "They thought they had killed me, but I came back for them before they could celebrate." Her words resonated deeply with everyone who heard them, becoming a rallying cry for those fighting to protect humanity's future. Though her body bore the scars of battle, her spirit remained unbroken. She vowed to continue the fight not just for revenge, but for justice, for all the lives lost and all the futures stolen by the aliens. And so, Emma prepared for her next mission, ready to face whatever horrors awaited her in the vast unknown of space. The war was far from over, but with soldiers like Emma Carter leading the charge, humanity stood a fighting chance.